My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old, a nurse in Dallas, Texas, and for the past 10 years, I've sacrificed my youth working double night shifts just to pump money into a family that's always treated me like a walking ATM. I thought this Christmas would be different. I'd finally get to rest, to be loved like a real daughter instead of just the person holding the wallet. But right there at our holiday planning meeting, while the whole family sat gathered around our twinkling Christmas tree, my mother and sister Angela handed me a very special gift: a $2,500 catering bill and a 12-hour straight schedule of babysitting 10 grandchildren so the two of them could relax and enjoy the holiday spirit. Angela looked at me with that cold smile and said, "If you don't do this, the whole Christmas will collapse, and everyone will know exactly whose fault it is." I smiled back, but in my heart I was already burning the family slavery contract they'd forced me to sign for so many years. What would you do when your own flesh and blood turned you into an unpaid servant in the very house you helped build with your sweat? Stay with me, because this story will prove that sometimes even love needs boundaries, and when those boundaries are crossed, the consequences will be more devastating than anyone could imagine. The roots of this betrayal stretched back to my childhood, where I learned that being the responsible older sister meant being invisible until someone needed something. While Angela was crowned the family princess, the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong, I was assigned the role of the workhorse, the reliable one, the one who would always be there to clean up everyone else's messes. I remember being 12 years old, standing in our kitchen while my mother explained to Aunt Susan why I couldn't come to the summer camp with my cousins. "Rachel needs to stay home and help with Angela," she said, as if my childhood was something that could be bargained away for convenience. "She's so mature for her age, and Angela is going through a difficult phase." Even then, I understood that my dreams were always secondary to everyone else's comfort. The pattern crystallized in high school, when our father's small construction business nearly went bankrupt. While Angela was planning her prom dress and dating the quarterback, I was working weekends at the local diner, handing over every penny to keep our family afloat. I watched my college fund, money I'd saved from babysitting and odd jobs since I was 13, disappear into the void of overdue bills and Angela's necessities. When I questioned it, my mother's response was swift and devastating. "Family comes first, Rachel. You'll understand when you're older." But I was already older than my years, already carrying responsibilities that should have belonged to adults. I gave up my dream of attending medical school at UT Austin, settling instead for a nursing program at the local community college because it was cheaper and would get me working sooner. Meanwhile, Angela floated through college on a partial scholarship she'd earned more for her smile than her grades, changing majors every semester like she was shopping for clothes. The house became a monument to my sacrifice. When the roof started leaking during my sophomore year, I took out a student loan to pay for repairs. When the plumbing failed, I picked up extra shifts at the hospital where I was doing my clinical rotations. Every time something broke, every time someone needed money, every time there was a crisis, the solution was always the same: "Rachel, we'll handle it." I became the family's financial safety net without ever being asked if I wanted the job. It wasn't presented as a choice. It was simply expected, as natural as breathing. "Rachel doesn't have a husband or children," I once overheard my mother telling a neighbor, "so she has the time and energy to help the rest of us." As if my life without traditional milestones made it somehow less valuable, less worthy of protection. The cruelest irony was that my dedication to the family was never seen as love. It was seen as obligation. When I bought groceries for Sunday dinners, it wasn't generosity. It was what I was supposed to do. When I babysat Angela's children every weekend so she could go out with friends, it wasn't kindness. It was expected. My contributions were as invisible as the air they breathed, noticed only when absent. Angela, meanwhile, perfected the art of taking without giving. She married young to a man whose ambition matched his paycheck, minimal, and began producing children with the same carefree attitude she'd brought to everything else in life. Each new baby came with new financial pressures, new emergencies, new reasons why Rachel needed to step up. When her husband lost his job, I covered their mortgage for 3 months. When their car broke down, I co-signed for a new one. When little Madison needed expensive medical tests, I liquidated my retirement savings without hesitation. And through it all, I told myself this was what family meant. This was love in action. This was the price of belonging to something bigger than myself. I convinced myself that my sacrifices were building something beautiful, something that would last, something that would one day be reciprocated when I needed support. But love built on inequality isn't love at all. It's exploitation with a prettier name. The breaking point should have come earlier, but I was too deep in the pattern to see it clearly. It wasn't until last Christmas when I watched Angela post Instagram photos of her perfect family holiday. Photos that featured the gifts I'd bought, the food I'd paid for, the decorations I'd hung, without a single mention of my contribution, that something inside me began to crack. The caption read, "So grateful for everything we've been blessed with this year." When you're surrounded by love, money can't buy happiness. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. My money had literally bought their happiness, their comfort, their Instagram perfect Christmas morning, but in the story they told the world, I didn't exist. That's when I started keeping track. Not out of spite, but out of curiosity. How much of my life had I given away? How much of my income went to supporting people who saw my generosity as their birthright? The numbers were staggering. Over the past 5 years, I'd spent more on my family than I had on myself. My apartment was furnished with hand-me-downs and thrift store finds, while Angela's house showcased furniture I'd helped finance. I drove a 10-year-old Honda with a rattling exhaust pipe, while her family took weekend trips to destinations I could only afford to dream about. But it wasn't just the money. It was the emotional labor, the constant availability, the way my own needs were always pushed aside for the next family crisis. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years because someone always needed something. I'd missed friends' weddings, birthday parties, and opportunities for romance because I was too busy being the family's unpaid support system. The final insult came in November, during what was supposed to be a casual family dinner. Angela was complaining about her holiday stress, dramatically sighing about all the pressure she was under to make Christmas magical for her kids. "I just don't know how I'm going to manage everything," she said, one hand pressed to her forehead like a Victorian heroine. "The shopping, the cooking, the decorating, it's so overwhelming." My mother, ever the enabler, immediately turned to me. "Rachel, you should help Angela with Christmas this year. You're so good at organizing, and you don't have your own family to worry about." The words hit like a slap. You don't have your own family to worry about. As if my life was so empty, so meaningless, that it existed only to serve theirs. That's when Angela delivered the killing blow. "Actually," she said, her voice brightening with sudden inspiration, "what if Rachel just handled the whole thing? She's got more free time than any of us, and honestly, she's better at this stuff anyway. We could all pitch in for costs, and Rachel could take care of all the planning and execution. It would be like having a professional event planner, but family." The room fell silent as everyone processed this suggestion. Not one person protested. Not one person suggested that maybe, just maybe, this was too much to ask. My mother was already nodding enthusiastically. "That's perfect. Rachel, you'd be so good at this, and think how nice it would be for everyone to just relax and enjoy the holiday without all the stress." I looked around the table at faces that showed relief, excitement, anticipation. Everything except concern for me. They were already mentally checking out of their responsibilities, already savoring the idea of a Christmas they could enjoy without effort, without cost, without thought. That's when I realized I wasn't their daughter or sister. I was their employee, and a poorly paid one at that. So when Angela called me 2 weeks later to discuss Christmas logistics, I wasn't surprised by what she had planned. I wasn't surprised by the detailed spreadsheet she'd created, assigning me every task from menu planning to gift wrapping. I wasn't surprised by the budget that somehow expected me to cover 80% of the costs, while everyone else contributed what they could. What surprised me was how calm I felt as I listened to her drone on about table settings and entertainment schedules. What surprised me was the clarity that washed over me as she explained how I'd be responsible for watching all the children during the party, since you're so good with kids and the adults will want to catch up. What surprised me was how easy it was to say, "Sure, Angela, I'll take care of everything," because I would, just not in the way she expected. The plan crystallized not in anger, but in a moment of perfect, cold clarity. I was sitting in my car outside the grocery store, staring at the catering estimate Angela had forwarded me when my phone buzzed with a text from my college friend Melissa in Denver. "Annual Christmas Eve potluck at my place," the message read. "Please tell me you can finally make it this year." I miss my favorite nurse. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A Christmas where I was a guest, not a servant. A Christmas where someone was excited to see me, not excited to use me. A Christmas where I could sit down, relax, and actually enjoy the holiday I'd been orchestrating for everyone else. That's when the beautiful simplicity of my situation became clear. I had agreed to take care of everything for Christmas. Angela had put it in writing, sent emails to the whole family about how Rachel is handling all the arrangements this year. She'd even posted about it on Facebook, bragging about having a personal event coordinator in the family. They'd given me complete control. They just assumed I'd use it the way I always had, to serve them. They were wrong. The next morning, I called the catering company and canceled our order. "Family emergency," I explained to the sympathetic manager. "We'll need to postpone indefinitely." The cancellation fee was $250, a small price to pay for what I was about to accomplish. Then I called the party rental company and canceled the tables, chairs, and linens Angela had insisted we needed to elevate the experience. Another $100 in cancellation fees, but my credit card didn't even flinch. With each phone call, I felt lighter. With each canceled service, I felt more myself. By noon, I had dismantled the entire Christmas production my family expected me to fund and manage, but I wasn't done yet. I booked a flight to Denver for December 23rd. One way, just to see how it felt to not plan a return. I called Melissa and accepted her invitation, and the joy in her voice when I said yes made me realize how long it had been since anyone had sounded happy just to spend time with me, not happy about what I could do for them. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not practical shopping, not problem-solving shopping, but pure, indulgent shopping. I bought a beautiful cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, the kind of thing I always admired but never bought because there was always someone else's crisis eating my budget. I bought expensive wine, not to share at a family gathering, but to give to Melissa as a hostess gift. I bought books I wanted to read, bath bombs that smelled like lavender, and a pair of earrings that caught the light beautifully. That evening, as I was packing my own suitcase for my own trip to see my own friend, Angela called. "Hey, I was just confirming timing for tomorrow," she said, her voice bright with that particular cheerfulness she used when she wanted something. "The caterers should arrive around 10, right? And you'll be here by 11 to start setting up?" I felt a smile spread across my face. the kind of smile that probably would have scared her if she could have seen it. Actually, Angela, there's been a change of plans. What kind of change? Her voice sharpened immediately. I won't be there. Silence. Then, what do you mean you won't be there? You're organizing everything. I was organizing everything, I corrected, but I've decided to spend Christmas with friends instead, in Denver. Rachel, this isn't funny. We've told everyone you're handling Christmas. People are counting on you. I'm sure they are. But you know what? I'm counting on myself for once. The silence stretched longer this time. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to find the right combination of guilt and manipulation to bring me back in line. What about the catering? What about the kids? Rachel, you can't just abandon your family. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm simply making the same choice everyone else has made, to prioritize my own happiness during the holidays. But what are we supposed to do? The question hung in the air, and I realized this might be the first time in years that Angela had been forced to ask it. What was she supposed to do? What were any of them supposed to do when their unpaid labor source suddenly became unavailable? I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said gently. You're all adults. Capable, intelligent adults. I have complete faith in your ability to handle this. Rachel, I have to go. My flight's early tomorrow. Have a wonderful Christmas, Angela. I know I will. I hung up before she could respond, then immediately turned off my phone. Whatever storm was brewing in Dallas could rage without me. The next morning, as my plane lifted off from DFW, I looked down at the sprawling city below and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for my own joy, rather than anxiety about everyone else's expectations. Denver welcomed me with snow-covered mountains and air so crisp it seemed to cleanse my lungs with every breath. Melissa met me at the airport with a hug so fierce it nearly knocked me over, and as we drove through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, decorated with lights that twinkled like stars against the snow, she told me about the people I'd meet at her party. There's Janet. She's a teacher who started a literacy program for adults. And Marcus, he's a chef who volunteers at the homeless shelter every weekend. And Sarah, she runs a nonprofit that helps women escape domestic violence. She glanced at me with a grin. They're going to love you. I've told them all about my brilliant nurse friend who saves lives and never talks about it. It was such a foreign concept. Being introduced as someone with value beyond my utility, someone worth knowing rather than using. When was the last time someone had described me with pride rather than convenience? That evening, gathered around Melissa's dining table with 7 people I'd just met, I experienced something revolutionary. A family dinner where I was a guest, where someone else had cooked, someone else had planned, someone else had worried about whether there was enough wine or if the roast was too dry. I sat in a chair that had been saved for me, ate food that had been prepared with love but without my labor, and listened to conversations that valued my thoughts rather than my services. Rachel, Janet said during dessert, Melissa tells me you work in pediatric oncology. That must be incredibly demanding. I nearly choked on my wine. When was the last time someone had asked about my work, my actual work, the thing I'd trained for and cared about? It is, I admitted. But it's also the most meaningful thing I've ever done. When you help a child fight cancer and win, when you're there for families during the worst and best moments of their lives, there's nothing else like it. You must see so much pain, Marcus said quietly. How do you handle that? For the next hour, we talked about my real life, not my role as family ATM, not my utility as a babysitter, but my actual thoughts, experiences, and feelings. They were fascinated by my stories from the hospital, moved by the courage I witnessed daily, impressed by the knowledge I'd accumulated over years of caring for critically ill children. "You know," Sarah said as we cleared the table together, "I work with women who've lost themselves in taking care of everyone else. What you've done, choosing yourself, setting boundaries, that takes incredible courage." I felt tears prick my eyes. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels selfish. "That's exactly what makes it courageous," she replied. "The women who've been trained to put everyone else first are the ones who feel selfish for basic self-care. But you know what? Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear." Meanwhile, my phone, which I'd finally turned back on, was buzzing with increasing desperation from Dallas. 12 missed calls from Angela, 7 from my mother, 3 from various cousins who'd apparently been recruited to guilt me into submission. The text messages ranged from pleading to furious to manipulative and back again. Angela's progression was particularly illuminating. "Rachel, please call me back. We need to talk about Christmas. This is ridiculous. You're being incredibly selfish. The kids are asking where Aunt Rachel is. What am I supposed to tell them? Mom is crying. I hope you're happy. We don't have any food for tomorrow. The stores are closed. You've ruined Christmas for everyone. Fine. Be this way. But don't expect us to forget this." Each message revealed more about how they truly saw me, not as a person with my own needs and desires, but as a resource that had malfunctioned. They weren't concerned about my well-being or happiness. They were angry that their system had broken down. The most telling message came from my mother at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. "I don't understand how you could abandon your family like this, after everything we've done for you. After everything we've done for you." The phrase was so perfectly backwards it was almost artistic, as if providing basic shelter and food during my childhood had created a lifetime debt, as if normal parental responsibilities had been investments that I was now defaulting on. I showed the message to Melissa, who read it twice before shaking her head. "Wow. She really doesn't get it, does she? Get what? That you're not their property. That you're a person with your own life, your own dreams, your own right to happiness." That night, as I lay in Melissa's guest room listening to the wind whistle through the snow-laden pine trees outside, I thought about Christmases past. All those mornings when I'd woken up exhausted from party preparation. All those afternoons spent washing dishes while everyone else relaxed. All those evenings when I'd driven home alone while my family enjoyed the festivities I'd created but couldn't participate in. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would wake up as a guest, not a servant. I would open presents that had been chosen for me, not gifts I'd bought for myself and wrapped with my own name to avoid the embarrassment of having nothing under the tree. I would eat breakfast that someone else had made, participate in conversations that valued my voice, and feel what it was like to be wanted rather than needed. For the first time in years, I fell asleep on Christmas Eve with excitement instead of dread. But back in Dallas, my family was experiencing their own Christmas Eve revelation. Without their usual orchestrator, their perfect Christmas was unraveling in real time, and the lessons they were about to learn would be far more valuable than any gift I could have given them. Christmas morning in Denver began with the smell of cinnamon rolls baking and the sound of gentle laughter from the kitchen. I woke up naturally, without an alarm, without a mental checklist of 100 tasks demanding my immediate attention. For a moment, I lay still in the soft morning light, marveling at the simple luxury of having nothing to do except enjoy the day. Meanwhile, 3 states away, my family was discovering what Christmas looked like when the person they'd taken for granted wasn't there to take care of everything. The first SOS came at 7 a.m. Denver time, while I was sipping coffee and watching Melissa's kids open their stockings. My 9-year-old nephew Ethan, Angela's middle child, had somehow gotten my number and called me, crying. "Aunt Rachel," his little voice was thick with tears, "Mom and Dad are fighting really loud, and Grandma is yelling at everyone, and there's no food for breakfast, and all the little kids are crying because Santa didn't bring what they wanted, and I'm scared." My heart broke for him. This sweet boy who'd done nothing wrong was caught in the crossfire of adults who'd finally been forced to confront their own selfishness. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, stepping away from the warm chaos of Melissa's living room. "I'm so sorry you're scared. Where are your parents right now?" "Mom is crying in the kitchen, and Dad went outside to smoke, and Grandma is on the phone yelling at someone about catering companies being closed." I could picture it perfectly. Angela, who'd never planned a holiday meal in her life, standing in a kitchen with no food and no plan. My mother, who'd spent years delegating every detail to me, suddenly faced with the reality of her own helplessness. My brother-in-law, who'd always treated me like hired help, discovering that hired help was no longer available. "Ethan, honey, are you safe? Are the adults being mean to you kids?" "No, they're just confused, I think. Mom keeps saying you were supposed to handle everything, and Grandma keeps saying this never would have happened if people just did what they were supposed to do." Even in crisis, they couldn't acknowledge their own responsibility. It was still my fault for not fulfilling my assigned role as family servant. "Listen to me, Ethan. None of this is your fault, okay? And none of it is my fault either. Sometimes grown-ups have to learn how to take care of themselves, and that can be messy, but they'll figure it out. Are you coming home today?" The hope in his voice nearly undid me. "No, sweetheart. I'm spending Christmas with my friends this year, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that Aunt Rachel needs to take care of herself sometimes, too." "Oh." A long pause. "That makes sense, I guess. I just wish you were here because you make everything better." And there it was. The innocent truth from a child who didn't yet understand the toxic dynamics at play. I had made everything better, for everyone except myself. I'd been so good at solving their problems that they'd forgotten how to solve their own. After I hung up, Melissa found me standing on her back porch, staring at the snow-covered mountains. "Rough call?" she asked gently. "My nephew. He's caught in the middle of what's happening back home." I told her about the conversation, and she listened with the kind of attention that reminded me what real friendship looked like. "That's heartbreaking," she said. "But you know what? That little boy just learned something important, that the adults in his life need to be responsible for themselves. That's a gift, even if it's wrapped in chaos." She was right, but it didn't make it easier to hear Ethan's confusion and fear. The updates from Dallas continued throughout the day, each message revealing new layers of the disaster unfolding without me. Angela's husband had driven to 3 different gas stations before finding one that sold overpriced sandwich ingredients. My mother had apparently called 4 different restaurants, all closed, demanding they cater a last-minute Christmas dinner. Angela herself had posted a series of increasingly unhinged social media updates that painted me as the villain in their holiday tragedy. "Family is supposed to stick together, especially during the holidays," read one post. "Some people obviously never learned that lesson." "When you've bent over backwards for years to help someone, and they abandon you in your time of need, you find out who they really are," read another. But the most revealing post came that evening. "Christmas didn't turn out the way we planned, but we made the best of it. Sometimes life teaches you that you can only count on yourself." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. After years of counting on me for everything, after taking my contributions so for granted they became invisible, Angela was suddenly discovering the value of self-reliance. By contrast, my Christmas day in Denver was a masterpiece of joy and belonging. Melissa's friends had embraced me like I'd been part of their group for years. I helped Janet teach her 7-year-old how to braid friendship bracelets. I listened to Marcus tell stories about his grandmother's recipes. I played board games with Sarah's teenage daughter, who was funny and smart, and reminded me of who I'd been at her age before I learned to shrink myself for other people's comfort. But the most profound moment came during dinner, when Melissa's father, a retired professor with kind eyes and gentle hands, raised his glass for a toast. "To chosen family," he said, looking directly at me. "To the people who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. To the courage it takes to choose love over obligation, joy over duty, and authenticity over convenience." As we clinked glasses, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with people who wanted me there. Not because I was useful, but because I was me. That evening, as we sat around the fireplace sharing stories and laughing until our sides hurt, my phone rang. It was my mother. Tea, and against my better judgment, I answered. "Rachel." Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "I think it's time we had a conversation." "Merry Christmas to you too, Mom. Don't you dare get smart with me. Do you have any idea what you've put this family through today?" I looked around at the warm, welcoming faces of my chosen family, then stepped outside into the crisp night air. "Tell me." Angela had to scramble to find food for 15 people. The children were disappointed because the gifts weren't properly organized under the tree. Your Uncle Robert asked where you were, and I had to explain that my own daughter had abandoned her family on Christmas. Do you understand how embarrassing that was? I understand that you had to take responsibility for your own holiday for the first time in years, and you didn't like it. That's not... She stopped, clearly flustered by my calm response. This isn't about responsibility. This is about family loyalty. Family. This is about doing what's right. You're absolutely right, Mom. It is about doing what's right. And what's right is not treating your daughter like an unpaid employee. No one has ever treated you like an employee. The denial was so absolute, so complete, that for a moment I was speechless. Mom, in the last 5 years, how many family gatherings have I attended where I wasn't working? How many holidays have I celebrated as a guest rather than as staff? Silence. How many times have you or Angela called me just to see how I was doing, without needing something from me? More silence. How many times has anyone in this family asked what I wanted, what I needed, what would make me happy? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was smaller, less certain. We thought you liked helping. You never complained." And there it was, the truth that had been hiding behind all their justifications. They'd confused my love with my compliance, my generosity with my consent. They'd built their comfort on my silence and convinced themselves it was mutual satisfaction. "I never complained because I loved you all so much I was willing to disappear for your convenience. But Mom, love that requires one person to disappear isn't love at all. It's exploitation." "You're being dramatic." "Am I? When was the last time you treated me like your daughter instead of your solution?" Another long silence. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she said, "I don't know." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. For a moment, I thought we might actually have a real conversation, the kind we should have had years ago. But then she rallied, falling back into familiar patterns. "Well, what's done is done. But this can't happen again, Rachel. The family needs you." And just like that, the moment was gone. She wasn't calling to apologize or to understand. She was calling to secure my future services. The family needs to learn how to take care of itself, I said quietly, and I need to learn how to be part of a family that actually wants me, not just what I can provide. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm staying in Denver for a while. I've got some thinking to do. Rachel, you can't just run away from your responsibilities. I'm not running away from anything, Mom. I'm running toward something, toward a life where I matter for who I am, not what I can do. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone again. Through the window, I could see my new friends cleaning up dinner dishes together, laughing as they worked. Melissa caught my eye and waved me inside, and I realized that this warmth, this inclusion, this effortless belonging was what family was supposed to feel like. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Melissa's neighbor, an elderly woman named Margaret who lived alone, had fallen on her icy driveway and needed help. Without hesitation, the entire group mobilized. We spent the day caring for Margaret, making sure she had food, companionship, and assistance with basic needs until her own family could arrive from out of state. But here's what made it remarkable. Everyone contributed what they could. Marcus cooked meals. Sarah handled insurance calls. Janet organized a schedule for check-ins. Melissa provided transportation to medical appointments. And me? I provided nursing care, monitoring Margaret's recovery and ensuring she was healing properly. We all gave freely, generously, joyfully. But we also all received. Margaret's gratitude was genuine and expressed to everyone. The group's appreciation for my medical expertise was vocal and specific. When Janet thanked me for teaching her how to properly wrap Margaret's sprained wrist, when Marcus asked me to show him how to properly move someone with mobility issues, when Sarah told me I was the kind of nurse she'd want caring for her own mother. These weren't people taking my knowledge for granted. They were people recognizing and valuing my contributions. This was what reciprocity looked like. This was what healthy relationships felt like. After a week in Denver, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going back to Dallas. At least not to stay. I called my supervisor at the hospital and requested an extended leave of absence. Then I called a staffing agency and arranged for temporary nursing positions in Denver while I figured out my next steps. Within 3 days, I had a short-term assignment at Children's Hospital Colorado, working with kids who reminded me why I'd fallen in love with nursing in the first place. But the most important call I made was to my nephew Ethan. I wanted him to understand that my absence wasn't about him or his siblings, but about the adults who'd forgotten how to be responsible for themselves. Aunt Rachel. His voice was brighter than it had been on Christmas morning. Hey, sweetheart. How are things at home? Better, I think. Mom learned how to make pancakes, and Dad fixed the dishwasher himself instead of calling someone. And Grandma said she's going to learn how to use the computer so she can order groceries online. I smiled. Crisis had apparently forced some actual growth. That's wonderful, Ethan. I'm proud of all of you for learning new things. Are you coming home soon? I'm going to stay in Denver for a while longer, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that sometimes adults need to make changes to be happy and healthy. Like when I decided to quit soccer because it wasn't fun anymore. The comparison was so innocent and so perfect that I laughed out loud. Exactly like that. Okay, but will you still be my aunt even if you live far away? Always. Distance doesn't change love, kiddo. And who knows? Maybe sometime you can come visit me here. There are mountains and snow and lots of cool things to see. The excitement in his voice was infectious. Really? Mom said we might take a vacation this summer. Maybe we could come see you. After we hung up, I realized that Ethan had given me something I hadn't even known I needed: permission to change course without losing connection. His easy acceptance of my new life reminded me that healthy relationships can bend without breaking, can accommodate change without collapsing. Meanwhile, my family back in Dallas was learning their own lessons. Angela had apparently hired a housekeeper after realizing how much work was involved in maintaining a home and caring for children. My mother had joined a senior center and was taking cooking classes, discovering talents she'd never developed because I'd always been available to handle meal planning. Most surprisingly, they seemed to be managing just fine without me. The world hadn't ended when their unpaid labor source became unavailable. They'd simply been forced to develop skills and systems they should have had all along. 3 months into my Denver adventure, I received an unexpected visitor. Angela flew in for a weekend, ostensibly to check on me, but actually, I suspected, to try to convince me to come home. We met for coffee at a cafe near my temporary apartment, and for the first time in years, we sat across from each other as equals. She couldn't ask me to babysit her kids or solve her problems. She couldn't hand me a bill or expect me to fix something for her. She was just my sister, visiting me in my new city, trying to understand the choice I'd made. "You look good," she said after we'd ordered our drinks. "Different. Happier, maybe." "I am happier. I'm living my own life for the first time in, well, maybe ever." She nodded slowly, stirring her latte with unnecessary focus. "I've been thinking a lot since Christmas. About what you said, about how I treated you." I waited, not wanting to fill the silence and let her off the hook for whatever she was trying to say. "I guess I never realized how much you were doing. It just seemed like you wanted to help, like it made you happy." It did make me happy for a while. But eventually, it stopped being help and started being expectation. When someone's generosity becomes your entitlement, the relationship dies. She flinched at the word entitlement, but didn't argue. "I hired someone to help with the house and kids. Did Mom tell you?" She mentioned it. "It's expensive. Really expensive. I had no idea how much work it was until I had to pay someone else to do it." She looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry we took advantage of you. I'm sorry we made you feel invisible." The apology was more than I'd expected, but I also realized it wasn't what I needed anymore. I'd moved beyond requiring their acknowledgement of the damage they'd done. I'd found healing in building something new, rather than waiting for them to fix something broken. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means something. Are you ever coming home?" "I am home. Maybe not permanently, but for now, this is where I belong." She looked around the busy cafe, at the mountains visible through the windows, at my relaxed posture and genuine smile. "I can see why you like it here. Everyone seems, I don't know, present, like they're actually listening when they talk to you." "That's exactly it. I matter here, not for what I can do, but for who I am." We spent the rest of the weekend doing sister things: shopping, hiking, sharing meals where neither of us was responsible for cooking or cleanup. It was a glimpse of what our relationship could have been if we'd started from a place of equality instead of exploitation. When she left, Angela hugged me tightly and said, "I love you. The real you, not just what you could do for us. I hope you know that." I did know it, finally. But I also knew that love alone wasn't enough to rebuild what we'd broken. Trust would take time. Respect would have to be earned. And I would never again sacrifice my own well-being for someone else's convenience, no matter how much I loved them. 6 months after that Christmas morning when I chose myself over servitude, I was offered a permanent position at Children's Hospital Colorado. The work was challenging and meaningful. My colleagues respected my expertise and valued my contributions, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. More importantly, I'd built a chosen family in Denver that operated on principles of mutual respect and reciprocity. When Melissa needed help during her divorce, we all rallied around her. When Marcus's restaurant struggled during a slow season, we organized fundraisers and brought friends for dinner. When Sarah's mother was diagnosed with dementia, we created a support network that shared the burden of caregiving among many willing hands. This was what healthy family looked like. People choosing to show up for each other, contributing what they could, asking for help when they needed it, and never taking anyone's generosity for granted. My relationship with my Dallas family evolved slowly, carefully. We video called regularly, and I visited twice that first year, but as a guest, not as unpaid staff. When I came for Angela's birthday in June, I brought a gift and my presence, nothing more. When they asked if I could watch the kids while they went to dinner, I cheerfully recommended a babysitting service and enjoyed a quiet evening reading in my hotel room. It took time for them to adjust to the new boundaries, but eventually they did. They learned to value my company for its own sake, rather than as a prelude to asking for favors. They discovered that when they treated me like family instead of hired help, I was actually more generous with my time and attention, not less. The most profound change came from my mother, who joined a support group for parents of adult children. She learned about concepts like emotional labor and parentification and began to understand how our family dynamics had harmed everyone involved, including her. "I robbed you of a real childhood," she told me during one of our phone calls, "and I robbed myself of a real daughter by turning you into a solution instead of a person." The insight was decades late, but it was real, and it opened the door to a relationship built on choice rather than obligation. Today, I'm still in Denver, still nursing, still surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. I've learned to say no without guilt, to accept help without shame, and to recognize my own worth regardless of how useful I am to others. Last Christmas, I flew back to Dallas for a few days, but this time I stayed in a hotel and participated in holiday celebrations as a cherished guest rather than unpaid coordinator. When Ethan hugged me goodbye, he said, "Thanks for teaching us that grown-ups can change too, Aunt Rachel. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever been the giver in relationships where others only took, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or friend group, please know this. You have the right to choose yourself. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to be valued for who you are, not just what you can do. Your love shouldn't require you to disappear. Your generosity shouldn't enable someone else's irresponsibility. Your kindness shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own exploitation. Sometimes the best gift you can give your family is forcing them to grow up. Sometimes saving yourself is the only way to save your relationships. Share this story if it speaks to your experience. Like this video if you believe that everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not just what they can provide. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about finding the courage to choose yourself, even when everyone else expects you to choose them. Because you matter. Not for what you can do, but for who you are. And that's a truth worth fighting for.